listening to MINDSHOCK True Crime. This is your host, Bruce McGuire. And this is the Amy Bradley series. Episode 6, The Witnesses. A lot of coincidence theorists and their cope spirals online regarding this case. They pretend and hallucinate that all witnesses who saw her after her groggy, half-asleep or fully asleep father, who said he maybe saw her legs at a particular time that has changed several times, somehow that's reliable gospel. But witnesses who actually knew her supposedly were all mistaken when they saw her closer to 6 a.m. on deck. And that's where we're going to be diving into in typical MINDSHOCK fashion, with logic and reason at the forefront here. Unlike any other podcast or documentary out there, attempting not to fall for any silly logical fallacies, which of course the coincidence theorists spam day in, day out, non-stop. But here we are going to logically examine all of this. As always, if you want to help support the MINDSHOCK podcast, help logic and reason return to a world that is quickly going extinct, keep up awareness in unsolved cases, cold cases, wrongful convictions, and more, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, like and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, and Patreon. Patrons do get priority for case topic, logical analysis, co-podcast, or requests. You could also be a guest on the podcast depending on your tier. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comments section. Unless, of course, you are with us here live, drop them in the live chat. I'll try to get to all of them. So yeah, we have one major post to go over here, which quite possibly makes sense of the entire timeline, which of course is very difficult to do. So there's actually more to the story regarding... Yeah, give me 1 second here. So the two witnesses who saw her, these two young women who saw her on the deck with Yellow, so they actually knew her prior. So like a lot of goofs say, oh well, eyewitness testimony is not reliable. They spam these non-congruent argument logical fallacies where they pretend that it's the same thing. Like when you actually know an individual and you see them in a controlled area where, you know, there's only a certain amount of passengers and there's only a certain amount of people out at that time. So they know both Yellow and Amy. So it's curious how the goofs hallucinate that eyewitness testimony is unreliable while completely ignoring the fact that this isn't random eyewitness testimony. The other thing is that another woman, an older woman, also saw the same thing all around the same time, right before 6 a.m. So we have not one, not two, but 3 separate people that all saw, not only saw Amy, but saw her with Yellow. And keep in mind, Amy and Brad did win some kind of contest and everything, so, like, a lot of eyes were on them. They weren't lost in the crowd. This is mostly an older crowd. So they were clearly known to most people there, or at least the people that were out in the club, out and about. So for them, and I brought up this question, and none of the coincidence theorists could answer this. If they did not see Amy with yellow, who did they see? It would be easy to rule out. I mean, they have the passenger list. So if it wasn't her, and how many other young women had a short hairstyle like that? So if they didn't see her and yellow, who did they see? So it would be easy to corroborate. Like it's not like there's hundreds of people out at that time. So a guy that looked like yellow and a guy that looked like Amy and a girl that looked like Amy, who were these two people if they were not them? And this is where the coincidence theorists just cope spiral and just either melt down or run away, because they can't answer any of these basic questions. So that's a curiosity. That's a curiosity. So let's jump right in here. Let's go over some mind-shock and comments here that potentially could make sense of all of this. So the first thing I want to go over is this post on the Amy Lynn Bradley subreddit, moderated by yours truly, the only logical subreddit in true crime on Reddit, of course. I believe Brad said Elizabeth saw Yellow and Catelyn take Amy to the back of the bar lounge. Obviously, where the staff elevator was that leads down the back entrance of the ship, loading, unloading department. Because the main front entrance gates weren't open yet, so the staff, etc., used the back entrance to leave the ship, which actually connects all the dots and time frame. A few minutes or so later, the senorita was kidnapped girl came running out. Different girl, not Catelyn. Brad said Catelyn was never seen working again after her, and Yellow took Amy behind the bar. So what about the senorita was kidnapped girl? Did she also go missing? Are there potentially 3 different missing women as a result of the Amy Bradley situation? Can anyone corroborate any of this? So we get eyewitnesses of seeing Yellow walking back alone and not even making eye contact with the 2 girls he chats up every moment he gets. So again, the coincidence theorists hallucinate that these 2 young girls that witnessed Amy with Yellow, that they don't, like, how would they even know who Yellow was? How would they know who Amy was? We'll get to the actual receipts, but they knew both of these individuals. They had talked to both of them. So they knew both of them. So yeah, the coincidence theorist cope in this case is just out of control. Like, just the level of mental, just the lack of mental capacity and the level of basic logical illiteracy in comprehending that maybe these 3 witnesses weren't actually mistaken. But a lot of these goofs, they're just mentally not capable of understanding that not all eyewitnesses are unreliable, especially when they're IDing people known to them. I mean, it's just a crazy kind of goofery here. So I've always thought Amy left her yellow top as a sign to let them know where she went. I'm with Yellow or something. That's kind of weird. Alright, let's look at some more posts here. So this is Chris Fenwick, the videographer. We kind of went over his account regarding the master copies and Amy's father's boss, all of that shady stuff. So he posted this August 23rd, 2010, possibly earlier. Let me fill you in on some details you may not know. Amy was last seen alive and well after she left the room, successfully not falling overboard and heading up the glass elevator with the bass player in the very early morning hours. She did not fall overboard. The rails on that ship in that room with that short of a girl would have made it impossible to accidentally fall overboard. 2 witnesses reported seeing Amy go up the elevator with Yellow, and shortly after, so he might have not even known about the 3rd witness at this time. That's crazy. came down the elevator alone. The handoff, if you will, likely took place in the back of the bar in the disco on the 11th deck, and she was almost certainly drugged and taken off the boat in a garbage bag through a service entrance before the passengers were allowed to exit the boat in Curacao. One of the worst parts of this case is the preponderance of people who weren't there, who have not spoken to the people involved, sharing speculation of what they think happened as though it is fact. I was there. I speak to the family. It is tragic. Yeah. So again, that doesn't mean he's right, but he was actually there. He filmed all these people. He talked to them. He understood the atmosphere, the layout, all of this. So obviously, his words here hold a lot more weight than random coincidence theorists coping on social media, hallucinating that human traffickers don't exist, or they wouldn't target one type of person or another, or that it just couldn't have been a situation, some kind of an assault gone wrong and passed off to traffickers without having been intended as some mass conspiratorial target from the get-go, like the false dichotomy's out of control with this coincidence theorist goofs. So that's what Fenwick said. Now here we have more images of the layout here. So, I think I showed this one before. This is the Viking Lounge on the 11th deck. Really fancy. Really, really fancy here. So, supposedly this happened behind the bar here. Something happened. Let's look at some more images here. This is the view from the lounge. So you'd be able to see quite a bit. Yet another shot here. Another shot from a different angle here. I mean, look at the ceiling. It almost looks like some kind of studio. And another shot of the elevator here. So apparently this is where the witnesses saw her with Yellow. So as you can see the layout, they may have been close enough to see, to make not only positive ID, but to see that Yellow handed her a drink, a certain colored drink, could have been Coca-Cola or whatever. So they were close enough to see the drink, and yet the coincidence theorists hallucinate. They wouldn't have been close enough to positively ID two people that they were familiar with and had exchanged words with many times. Yeah, a lot of goofery in this case. Alright, let's look at some more posts here. So this previous comment referencing Fenwick's blog, Crystal and Lori, the two young girls, stated they saw Amy and Yellow enter the elevator and go up to the disco area, aka the Viking Lounge, located on the 11th deck. 15 minutes later, they saw him return without Amy alone. Amy was never seen leaving the Viking Lounge. Another witness, Elizabeth, who was in the Viking Lounge early that morning, corroborated the testimony given by Lori and Crystal. So here we're talking 3 different testimonies all matching each other. Quite curious how the coincidence theorists want to write all that off and pretend it's the same thing as random people saying they saw a missing person in the street of a random city. Like pretending that's the same thing. I mean, that's the level of mental deficiency we're dealing with in a lot of these goofs, writing off the sightings of her closer to 6 a.m. So Elizabeth stated, and she again gave this testimony supposedly in front of a grand jury. So Elizabeth stated she watched Amy and Yellow get off the glass elevator, enter the Viking Lounge. She saw Yellow give Amy a drink that contained a dark liquid. It could have been Coke or coffee. Elizabeth left the Viking Lounge shortly after, as she had a shore excursion booked for Curacao. She left the disco and waited to disembark the ship. It has been reported there was a service freight elevator located on the 11th deck that connects to the upper deck of the cargo hold. Could this possibly explain why Amy was never seen leaving the Viking Lounge disco area? Yeah. And that's another thing, like the coincidence theorists say, oh, all these witnesses are mistaken about the time, but again, even if it was the wrong time, why wouldn't there be anybody who saw her leave, regardless of the time? Like, let's say nobody knows how to tell time. You'd still have people seeing her leave if it was earlier, because she did, or at least her card was used to access the room. And if her father really did see her legs on the balcony, then she would have left that area earlier in the night. Very, very curious here. There is also more to Elizabeth's testimony. When Elizabeth returned to the disco bar the next morning, the bartender, who had previously been very friendly, was now being aloof. Like, this is right out of a horror movie, right? Elizabeth asked him if he remembered seeing Amy with Alistair Douglas in the disco bar the previous morning. With that, a young Hispanic woman was working at the bar became very upset. She started telling Elizabeth that the, quote, the senorita had been kidnapped, end quote. This shocking statement was made to Elizabeth the morning after Amy's disappearance. The search in the Curacao Canal and Harbor was still ongoing. Why on earth would someone jump to the conclusion of kidnapping so early on in the investigation? And this is another thing, like the coping coincidence theories, they pretend all these witnesses didn't come forward until all this time later. This was all early on. This was all immediately. And so there's no positive ID on the young Hispanic woman. So we have potentially, and apparently the other female employee. So we have potentially 3 individuals here. And there was another employee on another Royal Caribbean ship that went missing. So we have potentially 4 females going missing inside of a year from Royal Caribbean that we know about. Potentially. Unless it can be corroborated. Like, we don't have corroboration of anything. I mean, that's kind of strange. I mean, does nobody think that's kind of strange? Or the fact that it wasn't at least nailed down that they were or weren't missing or could be found? Yeah, it's kind of weird. Kind of weird. Some more comments here. Elizabeth testified that after Alistair gave Amy the dark-colored drink, he turned the sound system on and played music. If he was intending to drug her and hand her off to an accomplice, it would make sense that he prepared her a drink, turned music on to provide cover for any sounds of resistance she would make. It also explains Crystal and Laurie saying that when Alistair came back down the glass elevator alone, he walked right past them without acknowledging them. Alistair was known to catcall girls and flirt with them. It was out of character for him to ignore the girls and walk right past them. Butch says, if you select cruise ships, so Vision of the Seas, which I think that's the same line of ships as Rhapsody, but I don't know if it's the same exact ship. You'll see a shaft besides the stairwell. Some of the things are hard to read because of how they were uploaded, but that shaft and stairwell goes straight down to the second deck. So there are potentially other shafts, stairwells, service elevators, etc. So clearly the motive, means, and opportunity are all there, regardless of whether this is true or not. Very curious. Very, very curious here. So I have here a post. Let me just get the last name out of here. Alright, let me just, yep, get this, get all the names out of here. Okay. So before we get to this message, so this is one of the witnesses. This is her Facebook account. Someone asked her, so did you see her at the time in the morning like Lori did? I need to know. Crystal says, yes, I was with Lori, so pretty much what she said was my experience as well. I've been on Unsolved Mysteries for this and have also testified in a grand jury against Yellow. So here is one of the witnesses corroborating on her own Facebook account, unless this is all fake and doctored, that she did in fact testify in front of a grand jury. Because a lot of the coincidence theorist goofs, they hallucinate and pretend to know that there definitely wasn't a grand jury, even though they weren't there. I mean, just the level of goofery in this case with coincidence theorists is insane. So, testified in a grand jury against Yellow back in the day. I was also interviewed by the FBI. Pretty much I've been involved since we docked in Curacao and provided security our account of what we witnessed that night. I personally think this case begins and ends with Yellow. So there you have it. If this is not if this is actually her Facebook account, which it appears to be from internet sleuths that track this stuff down, I don't want to dox anybody, so I blocked out all the names here. But yeah, this appears to be confirmation that a grand jury did in fact convene for this. Couple more things I'm going to go over in a second. The other thing that's kind of weird is all the goofs obsessing about the family. Like their motivations, this, or that, whatever they said. I mean, a grieving emotional family, even if they're doing things whatever way that might not be, you know, I mean, it's kind of hard to fault them, but how is that relevant to what these witnesses saw, the timeline of movements here? Like, all of that stuff's not really relevant. Okay, yeah, 1 second. I'm going to put up another post here with some more background info on Crystal and Lori. Information that I don't know has been put forth yet. Or we didn't go over it yet anyway. Alright, yeah, a couple more posts here. Okay. Okay, so let's see here. I don't get how all... So, in a response to a post, I don't get how all these people saw and recognized Amy in yellow. Amy wasn't reported missing at these points, but yet these people recognized her and the bass player from the band and committed it to memory, despite being on a ship with thousands of people. Oops. These are posted on a public forum, but let me edit that anyway. Crystal and Lori met Amy and Brad at the Miami airport before the cruise even started. They spoke to them and befriended them. Alistair was the bass player in the band and was a flirt. Crystal and Lori's friend Cheryl, who was also on the cruise, said he catcalled her sweet cheeks every time he passed her on the ship. What a nice guy. It stands to reason that teenage girls would all know who the bass player was if he was catcalling them. Alistair was not some maintenance worker in the bowels of the ship they never met. He was a member of the band. Again, the fact that this needs to even be explained and dumbed down for the coincidence theorists is just bonkers. Okay, here's another post. Couple things. The dance floor wasn't heaving. You can see in the video there weren't thousands of people dancing that night. Chris also says in his video that Amy and Brad were the life of the party. All eyes were on them, which makes them a little bit more memorable. Amy also approached the band and was sitting with them at some point. The two girls who saw her with Yellow told Ava that they'd seen very quickly after Amy was discovered missing, as confirmed by Chris Fenwick. Their memories were still fresh. They came in first and second place at the Limbo contest. They also met Crystal and Lori at the Miami airport before the cruise even started. Crystal or Lori thought Brad was handsome. These girls knew Amy and Brad. They weren't strangers brushing shoulders on the street. And again, just to reiterate the point, a lot of the coping coincidence theorists, they pretend eyewitness testimony is not reliable, equating all these sightings from people who specifically knew Amy and Yellow to random sightings on the street of people thinking they saw Madeleine McCann or whoever because of a news report in some kind of, middle of some kind of busy city with millions of people where nothing can ever be confirmed. So a lot of these brain dead goofs, they spam this false dichotomy, not just false dichotomy, but non-congruent argument logical fallacy, equating these two situations as if to say eyewitness testimony is not reliable when people are IDing people known to them in an area where there are a very limited amount of people in the first place. Like, they just don't have the mental capacity to see the difference between these two situations. So small children do. I mean, this is preschool level stuff, but yeah, it's tough. It's really, really tough to make heads or tails of this. And, some people think, Royal Caribbean actually gives free tickets for people, pushing positive PR online. But, I mean, obviously that can't explain all of these goofs. Because, look at the Maura Murray case. Are people actively being paid to say that she stumbled and got lost in the woods? And just obsess over that, wasting countless hours of their lives in desperately trying to convince everybody that's what happened in that case? It's kind of weird. So, yeah, I just wanted to go over just more background in those accounts. Some people are saying that the third witness is not reliable. But if all three witnesses saw the same thing, what would make her not reliable? It's kind of weird. These goofs, they don't have the mental capacity to comprehend that some eyewitness testimony is reliable. Who's going to say 100% of eyewitness testimony is unreliable? The times where it's most unreliable is where corrupt police are pushing people to make positive IDs to secure convictions, because eyewitness testimony is one of the leading causes of wrongful convictions. But that's in a situation where corrupt police are actively coercing witnesses or pressuring them in some kind of way. It's not organic testimony of people who specifically know individuals and say they saw them. Certainly not in an area where all individuals could be known, so if they saw someone other than Amy in yellow, it could be determined who they saw. So yeah, basic stuff here. Very painful to dumb this down to preschool levels, and I'm sure there's going to be a ton of goofs spamming the comments, still not comprehending any of this. But yeah, this was a short episode, just wanted to go over those particular accounts. Obviously, there's also the Carmichael account, which a lot of people forget that Carmichael not only saw Amy, but he also specifically spotted yellow with her, and he ID'd all her tattoos and the Das Equi watch, which was information not made public. So a lot of people hallucinate that, yeah, he was just mistaken. And he testified in front of the grand jury as well. So, yeah, the coincidence theorist cope in this case is definitely something to behold. Definitely very, very strange. But that's it for now. I will be back. I'll be going over the Netflix documentary, of course, and the Natalie Holloway case as well. Plenty more to come. If you want to help support the MindShock podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Just check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.